All right, so I'm here with my friends from Garrison Readiness Group, and one of the things we're trying to accomplish today was going through our gear and making sure that everything was standardized or at least compatible. We want to make sure there's interchangeability, and this is one of the groups that I am trying to work with when it comes to being prepared. And these are people that I want to be able to rely on during any kind of an emergency scenario, and of course, they should be able to rely on me as well. But for us to be more efficient in order to help each other out during any kind of crisis, it's better to have gear that can be, changed or, given to each other, whatever we need to use it for. The adaptability of different platforms is great, but if everything's standardized, it makes everything easier when it comes to being effective, right? So not only do you need to get out and get training, and you need to meet with your groups and make sure that everybody's on the same page for why we're preparing for the things we're preparing for, but at the same time, you want to make sure the gear you're selecting and the items you have make sense for the group, not just yourself, and take the notes you can from the information everybody has based on their gear selection, whether or not it's better for you to switch something out or if there's advice or suggestions everybody has, right? So this is Demrick, and Demrick, when it comes to this kind of stuff like standardization, what bare minimum, what do you think people should be looking at? Like, is it ammunition related? Is it like magazines, platforms themselves? Like, what do you think when it comes to that?
I think ideally, if you're freshly starting out, it'd be a good idea to sit down and have a conversation with people and build upon that. The unfortunate thing that we have, I guess, is that I went and got a bunch of different stuff, and then Damien went and got a bunch of different stuff, and now we have just this mix match of every different kind of thing, and there's not really much standardization. I mean, we're all running your standard AR-15 in some sort of configuration, and like we all take the same mags for all of our rifles, which is nice. We're trying to get Glocks in 9mm is sort of our standard for pistols.
Which obviously not everybody likes Glocks, but when it comes to standardization, sometimes that's more important than just personal preference, right?
Absolutely. And there's a reason that, it's not so much nowadays because most law enforcement agencies are going to the P320, but there's a reason that they were all stuck on the Glock 17 for the longest time, is because they're mass produced, right? They're interchangeable parts and things like that, and they are a reputable duty pistol for sure.
Okay. And, that was a good point you brought up that definitely kind of hits home for a lot of people, especially anyone who's like new to like putting a group together or working with other people when it comes to these preparedness exercises, I think is a good way to describe it, right? Sure. Kind of like game theory in a way. Yeah. But, the hodgepodge of different gear and equipment, like all of us have different chest rigs, different plate carriers, different backpacks or belt loadouts, right? So getting the basic gear standardized is a great place to start. Yep. But then one reason this happens, and Damien, I'm sure you can comment on this, but I think this happens because we're all searching for like the best possible solution for the type of gear that we're trying to rely on. And so we all go out trying to find these different pieces of gear, and then like Demrick said, there's a million different items and none of them are the same, and they're all different, so they have different features and everything else. So like what would you say could help solve some of that problem? Do you think it would be a good idea to like collectively agree upon certain items maybe being a good option for standardization, or do you think personal preference when it comes to that kind of stuff like soft goods is more important? Like I'm literally asking because I'm just not sure.
Sure. I think if you have a group like we do here, take advantage of this as much as possible. I don't know of many other people that actually get together and discuss these kinds of things, which is why I'm really appreciating this opportunity. When it comes to the personal preference versus going with something that's just same across the board as far as the standardization is concerned, like how the military or law enforcement do, where it's 100 of the same thing, we get 100 of those and 100 of those, and that's what we issue. That's good because nobody has a choice. There isn't much of the individualism with it. But another thing that we found out, where Demrick got 2 different types of plate carriers, I have a different one here, and a chest rig and battle belts, right, is we have the opportunity to explore a bunch of different options, where especially the more people that we have, Tyler has grabbed a bunch of different gear, look at the stuff that he's working with today, and all the other people that come out and associate with us. I don't have to buy 20 different plate carriers to try out 20 different plate carriers. When we get our groups together, I can try yours, I can try yours, I can try yours. I only had to buy 1 plate carrier, and all of us get to sample 19 plate carriers. So that's a nice thing. That's a huge opportunity and a resource. Having a group is that I guess all of you could go out and buy something different and then find out which one works and then just like sell off the stuff you didn't like. Like we all found out that whatever, turns out the Haley strategic rig works the best for all of us and like what we're hoping to do as far as our manpower, mission, and environment is concerned, right? Then we all dump the rest of our plate carriers and we just buy 20 Haley plate carriers or something like that. I think that's what's good. But now you have a different plate carrier, you have a different plate carrier, I have a different plate carrier, you do. That's fine, but essentially they all come down to being the same, right? Denmark's got 4 mags up front, you got 3, he's got 4. But what we're noticing is at least 3 mags up front, 1 in the gun, right? We've all got comms, we've all got medical. Now, like, I think it's inarguable some of the items that need to be in a carrier or chest rig. Some of those things are inarguable, right? Medical, ammunition, as well as communications. Like those 3 things. There's obviously accessories that can be helpful beyond that. Multi-tool, flashlight, maps, navigation, comfort things like food or NyQuil, DayQuil, right? Stuff that some people don't consider. But either way, those are the 3 mains that everybody needs to have is ammunition, medical, and communications.
Makes sense.
Everybody should have those things. Now, where you place them on your kit, I think that's the next step. And then how you interface those things, like then you can start getting into the details of that. But it's just those things, whatever plate carrier or chest rig, whatever load bearing equipment you have. If you picked up some Alice gear from your dad back in the NOM days, fine. Just make sure that it can utilize those 3 main items that are necessary.
So, so with soft goods, we're talking about, having the capability to have the equipment that we need with us, but it doesn't necessarily need to be standardized in the sense that we all need the exact same plate carrier,
No.
but we should all have the same capability in the sense of, all right, the magazines, the medical and everything else that it carries, and it might behoove you down the road if you really want to further standardize to make a lot of those placements similar so there's some kind of consistency throughout the group of like, hey, I need a tourniquet, I know, like grab left side, and it's going to be right there, something like that.
Yeah.
But I understand what you're saying. I think that you're right. The biggest benefit of all that is having the group to kind of work with and experience all this different types of gear to say, this actually isn't really working for me, but his belt does. So now I know that's something I need to switch out to. And if he likes his belt better than this, now we know this is like a subpar belt compared to something else that's available, right?
Yeah.
So, and for you, Tyler, when it comes to like these conversations and stuff, like, you're a good example here because you and I like we both have like our handgun preferences. Like you're a Beretta guy, I'm like a SIG guy, but the group has come together and said, well, all in all, we just need to be running Glocks so we have that compatibility. So as someone who like prefers, a Beretta 92 or an M9, how was that a difficult thing for you to do in the sense of that transition, or do you think regardless of how much you prefer that platform, that compromise is worth it because of that consistency and that standard?
I'd say it's definitely worth it. Not only or for a couple reasons, not just because of the differences in the platform, but Glocks are just so much easier to source parts for, whether it be magazines or any other accessories that you want to mount on that. Berettas are just that much more difficult.
True, yeah, that's true.
As far as being a serviceable, like being a serviceable handgun.
Yeah, I mean that, like just worrying about replacing parts too, but I mean like just the magazines alone, like you can get a Magpul 17 round or even 21 round Glock magazine for somewhere between $15 to $17, whereas the cheapest Metgar, not even Beretta brand Beretta 92 magazine is going to run you at least 30. So like it's almost 2 to 1. So has the transition from each platform in terms of shooting been difficult? Yeah, absolutely. It absolutely has been, but it's definitely worth doing just to be able to maintain a level of consistency with everybody else. I don't know necessarily if I'm going to need to pick up Denrick's pistol and shoot with it, but all of our pistols all take all the same parts, all the same springs, all the same pins, all the same batteries, all the same magazines, all that kind of stuff.
And that makes sense to me too. And it's like, one of the hardest things for me is, just accepting that I need to have this Glock for this reason, But I think a big thing that people get caught up on is like, OPSEC, right? Oh, my OPSEC, I can't reach out and create a mag or reach out and try to, find like-minded people because that'll give away my secret, right? I'm a prepper. I don't even want to know. And, I'm worried about people getting that information and using it against me at some point, right? But what we're doing is worth that risk in many ways because, all right, well, we all know each other's, personal business. We all know each other's, places of living and everything else. But it doesn't matter because first off, we're in a group here to take care of each other. But second off, that risk of putting our information out there for other people to have is worth what it returns, which is manpower, right? Which is honestly more important than all this gear you see on the table here. And then adding this gear in a standardized way with the manpower that's available changes everything and exponentially makes it worth that risk, right? Because I think a lot of people are concerned about that. It's hard to find a group of people, even though there's just 4 of us at this table right now. It's hard to find 4 people who all have this gear, all have this equipment, are all willing to standardize on it, are all willing to compromise on things that they do or don't want, and have the same mindset of training and wanting to be prepared for whatever might happen and some of the things that revolve around the idea of why we have these types of pieces of gear is why we're all here as concerned citizens. And I think that's worth that risk. Like for you guys, it's hard to find a group of like-minded people that does this stuff, right?
Yeah. It's taken us a lot of years to do this, but I think the juice is worth the squeeze, especially when having this community is so valuable and it just multiplies upon itself once we've already built this. Now we've got, it started with the 4 of us just being family, and then we had some friends and then the friends of those friends. And now we've got a solid group and we can all learn so much more because every walk of life has so much perspective and value to add. You can't experience everything yourself. So the more people you can surround yourself with, it's just bringing in so much value. And it's a shame. What people need to be doing more often is actually reaching out to speak with people because, as much of the stigma exists that gun guys are we're all reclusive, we don't want people to know. I mean, I think that's counterproductive as far as what we're all trying to do here is be patriots of this country. And when we're worried about someone else knowing we're a gun guy, no, we need to wear this loud and proud. Right. And I think being muffled and being stifled away from that and worrying about other people knowing that we're gun folk or that we sit down around a table and talk about our gear and strategize these things, going over the logistics of just gear itself, whatever, just having these friendly conversations. I think this is where our group grows, right, from the ground up. And this is how we actually change what this culture is about.
Yeah.
So I think being more vocal and understanding that there really is a community here. And I know of the 4 of us, if anybody reached out to us and was like, hey, I'm kind of getting into guns, do you care to talk about it? Absolutely. I'd be more than honored. I want to talk about nothing else more, Right. So I know that goes for so many other people in the community, in this culture, that so many people would be more than willing and enjoyed hanging out, spending time, and just BSing about this stuff. It's just fun, Oh, who made that? Where does that go? Can I see how that fits? Interesting, cool. I don't like that, and it just helps build better perspective of this culture, the gear, whatever. If we're talking about gear or not, even if we're just hanging out. Some people like politics, I don't, but this is my.
Some people like D&D.
D&D, whatever.
Yeah.
It's just about community, right? And we're trying to build things up. It's propagating positive gun culture, and it's the culture itself that we're really establishing here. What us 4 are doing here right now is establishing culture.
Yeah.
And we're keeping it alive here. And the more people don't speak up and reach out, then the more it dies, It's what they talk about, the holiday spirit, the less people that believe in Santa, and
the less he exists.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, same thing here.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, I always learn something whenever we get together, and just so everyone's aware, this is a small portion of the group that we work with. This is me working with the trainers of Garrison Readiness Group, and we're going through gear and equipment and the standardization and all that stuff. Like you said, it's fun in a way because we're sitting here, we're trying to accomplish, efficiency.
Yeah.
And at the same time, it gives us some camaraderie as well to be hey, we're all doing this together. These are all the things that we're all agreeing upon.
Yeah.
So there's this level of, I don't know what I would call alliance here,
Sure.
where it's, well, I know if I throw a magazine to Demrick or Damien or Tyler, it's good to go.
Yeah.
None of this is going to be a question in the future.
Right.
even though some of us have made compromises, right?
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, I wanted to just kind of say at the end of the day, because I have plenty of people who like to remind me of how often I say that, but I wanted to have this conversation to remind everyone that it's not just about getting gear, it's not just about having gear.
No.
Standardization within a group is a great idea, but at the bare minimum, you should be getting together with these people that you're associated with that have the same mindset, that want to be prepared for these types of events, and actually talk about it and go through strategy, equipment, and everything else related to what we need to be doing in the sense of networking, you know?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people maybe need a little push to do some more of that, because it is kind of scary and risky at first, you know? You don't know people sometimes, and it's like,
Sure.
you know, reaching out to you if I didn't know you and I'm like, hey man, like, you want to go over some weird gear and wear my stuff? It might kind of seem weird.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I think just expanding upon what Damien was saying earlier, you know, I mean, you've got all these guys that know different things, and when we bring all of our minds together, we're just that much better for it. I don't know jack diddly squat about radios, but we've got a guy that knows a lot about radios, so he handles our radio stuff, and I don't have to worry about it. We got all of our radios programmed, so all of our comms are the way they need to be, and I mean, it works out really well. I think when you have all of these minds coming together, and then just excelling upward. Right?
Yeah.
Collective hive mind.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. You can't do it all on your own.
Well, all of us have a different perspective too. When we were discussing optics earlier today, you know, Tyler had a really well thought out thought process as to like the general purpose optic selection for a game theory type scenario we're going through. And although Demrick and I had mostly agreed on what our thought process was, his perspective was so well detailed and thought out that, you know, it changed my mind about some of that, because it was just a good presentation as to why his selection was the proper one. So without that kind of change of perspective, I know, right? But without that opposite perspective,
Right.
we wouldn't have had the conversation, and you would just decide on something because that's what you think, right?
Yeah.
Versus having that other idea thrown at you that might actually
It's
be
vetted.
superior. You know?
It gets vetted, right?
Right.
There's just filters. You know, you get report back. You know, where you don't get stuck in your own echo chamber of like trying to justify how you spent $300 on something. You know, because it looked cool, or like that's your favorite place to go, or whatever. You know, like talk to somebody who's actually used it, and you know the experience about it. I mean, it gets vetted, right? Like your idea, whatever concept you had in your head about the optic selection, it got vetted by 3 other opinions here, you know, and maybe you still stuck with it, but then that would show that it stood a proof test,
Right.
you know, that it was well thought out. And if it stood against his argument, and my argument, then your optic concept makes sense. And if our opinions didn't change your mind, then at least it's been proof tested to some degree against other people that consider these same things.
And I have something else to consider.
For sure.
Which
Yeah,
is
you
good
have
to
some
have.
other opinions. Like, kind of had a point with that. And then you can try it out. You know what I mean? Like, here, use my rifle. See how you feel about it. You know? I mean, it's T&E. Like, a ton of this is T&E. And, you know, we're all chasing that unicorn in a way, that Venn diagram of, you know, like, affordable, but, you know, most quality, value, things like that. We're all chasing. That's what all of us are trying to do, to be the best that we can be. Make sure our money goes a long way with what our goals are, you know, and build a waypoint, describe that waypoint, and then define that waypoint. I think discuss the features about that waypoint, you know, and like ours, we discussed the waypoint of optics, the waypoints of plate carriers, you know, and then what is the definition of that? So,
Well, and one thing I definitely want to touch on is that none of this stuff matters if you don't use it. If you don't get out and train with it, if you don't wear it, if you don't figure out that this has a hot spot where I had to adjust this buckle because it was rubbing on my collarbone, those things you don't find out unless you actually put this stuff on, go out and move around with it and actually train. And especially when it comes to shooting, you don't really have an opinion on things like optics or sling placement or anything of that nature unless you're out there doing it. And you guys are trainers. Like, I'm one of your customers, one of your students, right? So as trainers, I guess just kind of on closing of like ending this conversation, just to give everybody something else to think about, right? What's some of the biggest like mistakes you see when it comes to like gear selection and standardization and stuff when it comes to like new shooters that come to you guys for training? Is there a lot of just lack of understanding? Is it lack of experience? Or is there a lot of just accepting some kind of narrative that they've digested on the internet or something that comes to the table and doesn't make sense?
I think it's a lot, or really one of the biggest ones is a lack of actual testing, and not necessarily like the peer testing that we were kind of talking about, but actually like going out and running drills with it. Because we went through a training session last year before, where a guy was running 4 FNX 45 magazines on a leg panel, dropped way down to basically just above his knee, and clearly he had never tried this out before, because he did, after any kind of movement, you have like basically 5 pounds of magazine and ammunition swinging back and forth on your leg.
That's 60 rounds of 45, right?
Yeah,
That's crazy.
It's a ridiculous amount. So like, I think if he had tested that and actually ran around with it before, he would have noticed that this is probably not going to work. I think that's.
And you just showed up to a training seminar.
Yeah, he paid it.
First time basically wearing that thing.
Paid a very large amount of money to be there, just like we did. And he didn't. It was obvious that he never trained with this gear before.
Gotcha. Okay.
Like it was obvious he never even tried putting it on and playing around with it. Even in his garage, like just doing dry fire and stuff.
Which is what people suggest doing, like dry fire and just wear stuff and run around. You don't have to have a rifle on you. If you live in a suburban neighborhood, go in your backyard. You can wear this stuff. Just don't maybe have your guns out. But that doesn't change what it will do in the sense of weight shifting and everything else, right?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
One thing I see in the entry level, for sure, but a lot of people, they want these things because they think it's a good idea, but they're not ready to commit to it. Like us, at the very least, we're enthusiasts. I would maybe even say it'd be fair to say that we're zealots, right? We love nothing more than this environment that we're in, with the gear, with this culture. Some people, they lack commitment into something, so they don't want to spend a ton of money because it's not something they're going to be super invested in. I started playing tennis. I bought a $30 racket from Walmart. Okay, I'm not going to go play tennis, but I just want to play around with tennis. We see a similar thing where people don't want to spend what it takes to have stuff that's going to be worthwhile, so they'll get super cheap things. And I don't mean cheap as in just inexpensive, but cheap in quality and like flawed or poorly thought out, right? Like plate carriers on Amazon for $60. Just please be careful with those things. Having something is better than nothing, and even that $60 plate carrier is good. That'll serve you for years if you never use it, right? But if you're actually intending to use any of your gear, if you're going to take this subject seriously, just take your time, save some money, and make one correct choice versus making 3 incorrect choices that eventually cost you the one correct choice anyway. And that's where peers come in play, right? There's so much content on the internet to find out what is generally rising to the top, and typically make a choice based off of those options that are common at the top, right? If you see the fact that like people are running example A plate carrier like this is a super common setup. You're seeing it with 3 mags of ammo, medical, and comms. It's probably something you should consider, right? Like if that's what everybody's doing, there's probably a reason for it, right? There is a little bit of that whole like sheep, right? Mirror, monkey say, monkey do thing that starts happening in the community, but probably for good reason for most of it. So
right.
I would say just take your time and make the correct decisions. Just take your time. Don't rush into it. Don't fear. Don't panic. Just chill. Make good choices going into the gear. Make sure it's well thought out, right? And it's pressure tested, like we did here with so many other discussions about carbines and gear and just philosophy. So
yeah, and part of getting the group together to do these things does some of that for us, right?
Yeah.
If someone shows up and has that type of equipment, it lets us help them understand what its limitations are and what might be a better option, or what maybe they should start shooting a goal towards, right?
Yeah.
So I think that that's also very helpful, especially when you have people with knowledge and experience, which is a big reason why I come here and hang out and learn from you guys and do these game theory sessions, because you have so much more information that you can give me that helps me develop and become better and more efficient. So it really is valuable for me, and I think anyone would get a lot of value out of this, and I'm sure you guys do as well.
Absolutely.
For sure.
This thing, it takes a village and standing on the shoulders of giants. Like those are things that we constantly repeat. We're not calling ourselves giants, but just how much faster you've learned being around us, like you don't have to make the same mistakes we did. It took us a super long time to gather this information.
Yep.
Anybody that we bring on board now, they get to skip all that BS that we had to go through to like rise to the position that we're at now. Obviously, we still have plenty to go, and there's a plethora of information and goods that we haven't experienced or don't know. But you get to skip all the BS, and you can kind of you can just kind of tag up with where we're at, and then we can go, and you'll learn faster. So it takes a village. Like, it takes all of us to do this. The community, all of you out there reaching out with each other. It takes all of that, and then all of us can just keep rising off the mistakes that other people have made before us. The insights and the peer reviews, like we're already talking about pressure testing these ideas. Unfortunately, the internet gets kind of infectious sometimes, but
Yeah.
it's like, you like what your mama told you is, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything, and just remember, like, glass houses and shit,
Yeah.
It's like, you think you've got a great idea, or somebody else's idea is stupid. You've probably had stupid ideas. Like, it's,
Only a few, you know?
like everybody has, everybody says super stupid things, not you. Yeah, no.
I believe him, actually.
He's actually really reasonable.
He's not a good liar, so.
No, he's not. He's a really reasonable guy.
He didn't lie right then,
He's
yeah.
a really reasonable guy. So that would be my advice about it.
No,
try and make correct decisions and just, like, be a community.
And that's helpful, and I think that even myself in the beginning, I was very willing to just buy something because it was cheap.
Yeah.
And when I say cheap, I actually mean expensive and cheap in quality.
Sure.
But I didn't know the cheap and quality part yet.
Right.
All I knew was the inexpensive part.
I think we've all made that mistake at least once.
Of course, because it seems great.
Yeah.
Oh, a complete AR-15 upper for $98? Sold,
Yeah.
So, in Demrick, one thing that, I'll always remember is my first class I took with you guys, that carbine course. One thing that I took away from that was that people were showing up and didn't even have, like, their optics even installed on the rifle.
Yeah.
It was like they weren't even installed. They definitely weren't zeroed. And it was this whole process of, like, hey, well, let's, like, put this on for you and stuff. And then, of course, there was zero interaction with it beforehand. So they
Totally
weren't
unfamiliar with the system.
completely. And you literally put a red dot on that person's firearm to make it so that they could just get through the drills in the course.
Yeah.
And, I mean, is that something you see quite a bit as a trainer, that people have this stuff, but they literally haven't even, like, put one and two together yet?
Yeah, it's difficult to fault those people for that because, like, you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
So that's tough. And I give kudos to those people that do show up and they come out here and they do get training.
100%.
Because, I mean, how are you going to know what to, like, that guy that showed up that didn't even have an optic on his rifle, he didn't know how to put it on, he didn't know how to zero it. So,
and there wasn't iron sights either, so it wasn't like he could just start going without an optic. Right?
Exactly. Yeah, and it made no sense to go through the entire training without a zeroed gun because then it's like, what the heck are you gonna do? It's pointless. So we had to go out and we had to affix the optic, and then we had to zero it so that he could participate in the training. And it's tough. I don't see that a whole lot. People showing up with stuff that they don't know anything about. It happens from time to time, though.
Right.
Yeah, and like I said, it's difficult to fault them because, they show up and they're seeking us, who we know more, I think, than the average person.
Right.
I would argue that. And they show up seeking our knowledge, and hey, what better place to go to get my optics zeroed than guys that do this for a living, right?
So I guess the moral of that story, at least from my perspective, is just being like someone who gets training and somebody who is a patron of the stuff that you guys do, is that I still prefer those people to show up and get training, even if they know nothing.
Absolutely.
I think that's a huge barrier for some people is being afraid of not knowing anything, so they're afraid of being embarrassed or, like, shamed when they show up. Like, hey, but these people literally showed up with no optics at all on their rifle and were willing to just say, hey, I literally know nothing. Mm-hmm. And I think that was still better than the alternative.
Yeah.
But it also reminds me that we have so much access to information and we have so much access to data that take some time and do just, like, the minimum amount of research.
Yeah.
It is so easy to find how to bare minimum accomplish some things, especially if you are going to spend money and invest in training, which I suggest everyone do some basic research on your own, at least, just to say, what is it I should expect and what should I have prepared ahead of time so I know that I show up with all the proper equipment. I mean, as people who are wanting to be prepared and as preppers, a big part of our job is being prepared for whatever activity we're about to encounter. Mm-hmm. And so, like, take a little time and just do some research and try your best to understand and ask questions if you don't.
Yeah.
And find people that have some of this information that you can talk to, so that way they can help you with that process, you know?
There's a proverb that I say all the time. It's the man who doesn't ask the question is a fool for life, but the man who does ask the question is only a fool for a minute.
Yeah, 100%.
So I've got no issues myself. There's plenty of things that Damien knows or Tyler knows, and I've got no problems whatsoever asking the question.
Dude, I asked a chiropractor the other day if he was familiar with muscular anatomy.
Why not?
I asked him that to his face with all sincerity, right? And I'm like, I thought they're just bone doctors, you know, but like I got some problems with my shoulder. I got some problems with
He
my.
thought you were just a dick, you know?
He was like, yeah.
Do you work on muscles?
Yeah.
I'm a chiropractor.
Whatever, right? So obviously I was a fool in the moment, but you know, don't be afraid to ask questions.
Certainly.
Serious.
And I ask these guys questions all the time. I'm always texting you guys, hey, this or that. Tyler hates me because I bother him on multiple different messaging apps. I'm like, oh, he didn't respond to my text, so Telegram, all right, you know.
Yeah.
And he answers questions sometimes, but at times I'm like, he's busy, I guess, you know. But it's important because these are the things we're trying to learn. And I have so many questions because I just don't know much. I don't know enough.
Yeah.
And I think that's another thing, a big takeaway from our conversations and these group get-togethers is we all only know as much as we know. So don't be afraid to get out there and find out more and learn what you can with the people around you that can offer some of that. You know?
Get out of your comfort zone a little bit, right?
Yeah, you have to.
You're not going to go anywhere if you just stay warm, comfortable, and cozy, right? Like today is a crappy day outside, it's cold, but these are the conditions that we have in the place that we live, so we should be training on a day like today.
Yeah.
It's going to be uncomfortable, and it's going to require effort, but these are the things we have to do. Get out of your comfort zone, and then you can excel.
And honestly, we're Americans, right? And we're concerned about the direction things are going, and we're doing our best to be prepared for whatever might come our way. And that's why we do these things. It's not just about being preppers also. There's a patriotic concept that surrounds it as well.
Absolutely.
And we want to maintain the quality of life and the comfort of our families and friends and the people that we love. So this is an obligation for many of us to be as prepared as we can for things that could occur.
Certainly.
And I guess, a good way to kind of end this conversation would be just to say that LPVOs suck now, because apparently that's what everyone says, right? Oh, man.
It's a hot take on the internet, man.
Yeah, that's what I've been told now.
Yeah,
So
it's okay if you have LPVOs. They'll come back around in a couple of months. Somebody important on the internet will say that they're great, and then they'll be totally in stock.
yeah, hold on to them so that they get their value back again.
Oh,
you know?
yeah. Yeah.
But I felt like I had to stir the pot a little bit there.
Sure,
Like,
yeah.
Somebody had to say it, right?
Go check out the gray market if you're looking for deals on LPVOs, because everybody's concerned that their LPVOs are junk now, so you can go buy one for cheap and then flip it for twice the price when they want it back in 6 months when that important person says they're great. Again.
Yep.
And we did it. So I think that's it.
Yeah. At the end of the day.
Yeah. Hey,